And so what elementary school did you go to?
H.V. Helbing Elementary.
Okay. And then what about junior high?
W.A. Meacham.
Okay, Meacham. And then high school?
High school, Diamond Hill High School.
Diamond Hill High School. And you said you graduated in 1974, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what did you decide to do after you graduated from high school?
You know, I knew I did not want to work in the manufacturing lines, so I went downtown Fort Worth and just walked and knocked on doors to find a job, and ended up finding my first job at First of Fort Worth, downtown. That wasn't my first job, but I ended up working at the bank, stayed there in banking for 25 years, and stayed at First of Fort Worth for 10 years, and then after that I switched to some other banks. I can literally say I've worked for every bank in Fort Worth twice. Bilingualism paid, and I let it, you know, not afraid to say that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you grew up speaking Spanish then?
I grew up, my first language was English,
Okay.
but, you know, Spanish was spoken at home. And so, you know, that's where I got my Spanish from.
Were you ever punished in school for speaking Spanish?
No.
No?
No.
Was any kind of bullying going on with any of that?
No.
That's interesting.
Well, you got to think about it. Back then, there wasn't a lot of Hispanics, and a lot of us at my age, our first languages were English. So, you know, we were, you know, predominantly speaking English at all times in school. So it wasn't that we were speaking Spanish back then. It was a different era.
Okay.
In fact, I did a speech at HSA several years ago and talked about that, talked about the barriers of the Spanish language, you know. And a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, you know, he was the first, you know, generation here. His first language was Spanish, and he had issues in school with it. And so he vowed not to teach his son any Spanish. Well, his son was working for the Arlington Police Department and was having to go back to school to learn Spanish. So he said, you know, he felt like he failed him. And I said, it wasn't that. It was, you know, it was society at the time. There was no ESL classes back then. ESL classes in Fort Worth ISD didn't come to fruition until the mid-'80s.
That late?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the population was not here.
Okay.
You know, the population did not come. It started coming here in the early 80s, mid-'80s. So it started changing the way they taught these students, because they were predominantly Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.